again. I'm Katie. I'm back reading No Bad Parts by Richard C. Schwartz, PhD. And we are on part 3, Self in the Body, Self in the World. So let's go. I have a giant glass of water with me. Doing my best to stay hydrated. Okay. Chapter 9. Life Lessons and Tormentors. Get it? We are here to learn a particular set of life lessons, and the lesson plan is already within us. Each of us carries legacy burdens inherited from our families and cultures, and each of us also accrues plenty of personal burdens along the way. So our lesson plan begins with unloading those burdens, and that sets the stage for the most important lesson of all, finding out who we really are. First, we find out who we aren't. And that takes identifying the extreme beliefs and emotions our parts carry that have often unconsciously governed our lives, and determining that those don't belong to us. Along the way, we come to know ourselves and become self-led. Needless to say, the journey isn't always unidirectional or smooth. It took me a while to realize that I'm not worthless and pathetic. Those were just beliefs my exiles carried from being raised by a frustrated father. For years I functioned fairly well in the world, but I had an underlying sense that I was fooling people, and I was driven to achieve in order to counter that suspicion. And when I was with other people, I would avoid dropping my guard out of fear that they would glimpse that real me and blow my whole act to pieces. This went on even after I tasted self through meditation. In fact, even as I was developing IFS, those exiles would still rush in to remind me of what a pathetic loser I was, especially when I didn't get the positive feedback I was after. Like many striving achievers, I didn't work with that exile until I was forced to. It took friends in the IFS community to let me know that my protectors were getting in the way of my being a good leader. I finally took their feedback seriously, which was hard. It meant getting to know and unburdening this little boy inside of me who was stuck at a time when my father yelled at him and told him he was good for nothing. Most of me already knew I was good for something, but this lonely little guy didn't. After retrieving and unburdening him, he got to learn that lesson too, and then he was a bundle of inner delight. Correspondingly, when my big achiever part became more relaxed, I could more fully enjoy being alive with the knowledge that, far from being worthless, I was a lovable and loving man. This in my bones knowledge gave me more courage to bring IFS into a skeptical world, and continues to do so today. Here's the point of the story. We are sacred beings, as are our parts, as is the earth. Too many people die without knowing that. Part of what keeps me going is the hope that IFS can change that. When we know who we are, when we're in self, we automatically relate to others from those 8 C words, and consequently, we know how to communicate effectively. Good communication involves calm, clarity, creativity, and compassion. Like so many other performance activities, the main challenge is not so much in mastering a particular skill as it is in convincing the managers who make you self-conscious and afraid of failing to trust yourself to lead. When that happens, it isn't as difficult as it once was to repair broken relationships, because you can better work with the minimizing parts of you, or the ones who carry shame. You can reassure those parts in the moment that your mistake doesn't make you bad, and you won't be punished the way you were as a child. Additionally, you can be present with the other people's hurt without needing to fix or change it, because you can be present that way with parts of you when they are hurting. The way we relate to our parts translates directly to how we relate to people when they resemble our parts. In the same vein, if you don't fear your own anger, you'll be able to stay self-led when someone's angry at you. The person's judgment of you won't trigger your own inner critics, because you know who you are, and because those critical parts of you have retired or taken on new roles. So many of the obstacles in our relationships are because we fear the mayhem that someone else's behavior will create in our inner systems. When self leads, the mayhem is gone. Again, I'm not promising you'll be self-led all the time, but even when you're not, you'll start to notice that you're not. And when a part takes over and you hurt somebody, you know to stop what you're doing, get some space, listen to the part, and come back and speak for it rather than from it. You speak for your parts from an open-hearted place of self to make a repair with the person you've hurt. In learning these life lessons and becoming more self-led, we have the good fortune of having so many excellent teachers out there. I'm not talking about the gurus, priests, professors, or parents, although they can certainly help you learn your lessons if they've learned theirs. I'm talking instead about the difficult events and people that trigger you, your tormentors. By tormenting you, they mentor you about what you need to heal. That is, the emotions they trigger are usually valuable trailheads. If instead of blending with these emotions or beliefs, you investigate and separate from them, they will lead you to key exiles like my little worthless guy. Tormentors are so valuable because often you aren't aware of those parts until they or their protectors are activated. Your managers had buried them so far inside that you had no idea. You might have had a nagging sense of them, but your managers found a way to distract you so you wouldn't go there. I've been lucky to have so many tormentors over the course of my life, even if I didn't know it at the time. My parents, for example. A good number of them were actually clients, especially those who were highly sensitive to even the smallest shift in my presence. They had amazing parts detectors. If I was even slightly distracted, impatient, or directive, they would read me the riot act. While they were often overreactions, I learned quickly the futility of trying to point that out, and instead I came to value these episodes. Even if my clients were off the mark about my motives or thoughts about them, usually they were accurately detecting a protector in me that I needed to explore. I would apologize to the client, and I found this to be highly therapeutic because most of them had intuitions that had never been validated before. And then I'd also work with my own therapist between sessions to help me track and heal the parts I found. My wife, Jan, deserves a lot of credit for the positive changes people recognize in me over the years we've been together. She has challenged my inconsiderate, narcissistic, and overworking parts in ways that were painful but ultimately healing. We have been outstanding tormentors for each other, and I'm proud to say that we still help each other heal that way, especially after big fights. This is not to suggest that every person or event that gets to you is a valuable tormentor. And I certainly don't want to advocate continuing abusive relationships for the purpose of learning some lesson. In that case, the best lesson is probably to take care of yourself and get out of there. Despite kicking off this chapter with the idea that we're all here to learn a particular set of lessons, I've always cringed at the New Age belief that everything that happens is designed to teach you something. I'm also not a big fan of mistaken, westernized notions of karma. Bad things happen to us that have nothing to do with lessons or with our behavior in this life or previous ones. That being said, when parts do get triggered, it never hurts to pay attention and take care of them. Maybe one lesson in that is for them to trust you to handle the challenging person or event in front of you, as when I was drowning. If you take this perspective seriously, then life becomes an interesting series of opportunities to learn that big lesson of who you really are. The acronym AFGO, another effing growth opportunity, comes to mind. Of course, it's not always that easy to make the U-turn necessary to get the next piece of your curriculum. Your protectors are usually convincing in their message that the tormentor in front of you is the real problem, and sometimes, of course, they're correct. But even then, their lesson is to trust yourself to take care of them and navigate the interaction the best you can. Exercise, advanced parts mapping. You've already done one form of this exercise, mapping your parts, earlier in the book. This is the advanced version because you'll be using tormentors to locate and work with whatever clove of garlic got triggered by the person or event. Here's a personal example. I was hard at work on a presentation early this morning and suddenly realized that I'd forgotten to join an important call with all of my 5 brothers to work out some business dealings. There was a lawyer on the call too, and I was the only brother who didn't make it. I'm the oldest of the 6, and I wasn't your typical oldest brother in the sense that I was probably the least responsible one. As we were growing up, my father was pretty hard on me about that. I have a critic who can imitate my father pretty well when I screw up, and I immediately noticed that part kicking in today. Although it's changed quite a bit over the years, when I make any type of significant mistake, it still does its thing to some degree. And that always brings up an exile, which means I notice a rush of shame take over my body. I felt so disappointed after this happened. After all the work I've done on myself, I thought I was beyond that degree of internal reactivity, but since I'm committed to using such episodes to grow, I called the person I trade sessions with right away and used the whole incident as the focus of more healing work. I tell you this story to inspire you to think of a situation that you'd like to explore more and learn about the parts involved. Before you begin, however, I want to note that you're going to be learning a little bit about the exiles your other parts protect. You won't actually be getting close to the exile, but for some people, just learning about their exiles can be triggering. If at any point the exercise feels like it's too much, then pause and step out of the practice and check in with yourself and remind your parts that you're still there. If that helps, then go back in. If it doesn't, then skip this one. Think of a time when you are quite triggered by something. As you think of that situation, notice the triggered parts and then pick a protector from that clove of garlic to focus on. Then place your attention on that protector exclusively, finding it in your body or around your body, and notice how you feel toward it. And if you feel anything extreme toward it, you're afraid of it, for example, that's just another part of you, so move your focus to that one for a second. As we did earlier in the dilemma exercise, notice the 2 of them, the original protector and the one who has attitude about it, and how they fight inside of you. You can also notice if there are any other protectors that jump in to ally with either side or even take a third position. So far, we're not interacting with any of these parts, we're just getting a sense of this network that comes up around this trigger in your life. We're getting to know the protectors involved so far. At some point, as you watch the stance of your protectors, see if you can open your mind more toward them so you can learn about them. If you can't get there, that's okay. Just spend the exercise noticing. If you do become interested in what all of this activity is about, then go ahead and ask each one about the vulnerability it protects. What does it fear would happen if it didn't take its position? If your protectors answer that question, you will begin learning about the exiles that drive these extreme responses. And without going directly to those exiles, see how much of a sense of them you can get. Can you guess what they're like? Can you become more aware of their vulnerability? As you learn more about what your protectors are trying to take care of, it may help you open your heart more to them because you get more of a sense of what they're dealing with, and how high the stakes are. I'm going to reread that. As you learn more about what your protectors are trying to take care of, it may help you open your heart more to them because you get more of a sense of what they're dealing with and how high the stakes are. Often these protectors are like parents who have a highly vulnerable child. They fight and polarize about how best to protect that child because the stakes are so high if the child were hurt. The difference is that these protectors aren't old enough to be parents. Usually they're young themselves, and they're in over their heads just trying to do their best. Let them know you get all that. Tell them you'll keep working with them, and let the exiles know you're aware that they're in there. You can't visit with them today, but at some point, you're going to try to help them too. Remember that what happens in that inner world has tremendous applications for what happens in the outside world. Now bring your focus back outside and turn your attention back to this external world. You're leaving your internal world, but you're not forgetting it. For some of you, I suspect that exercise was a little bit difficult especially as you get to know about your exiles. It can be disconcerting to know they're there, and sometimes, even though I said not to go to them, you do get hits of their pain or terror or shame, as well as the kinds of beliefs they carry. That can be troubling for the protectors who've been trying to keep them contained all this time. It's not uncommon to feel a little overwhelmed, and I understand it can be difficult. Often when we touch an exile, even slightly, there's a big backlash from protective parts that are afraid, or parts that might now want to criticize you. But if you can keep the perspective that it's just because they're scared, then you can reassure them and help them remember who you are. And maybe that can help you stay grounded. You are a person who has courage, confidence, clarity, feels connected, and is grounded. If you're feeling anything that tells you you're not, just know that those messages are coming from parts who don't know who you are. Recall that they often believe you're much younger than you are. It's helpful to not totally blend with them and enter their world, but instead reassure them, separate from them, and help them trust that these explorations are hard, but you can do it because you're not a little kid anymore and you're here to help them. Exercise. Working with triggers. If some of your parts were triggered by the last exercise, here's a practice to help you with that. Notice what's happening in your body and your mind after having gone into that inner world for a few minutes. If there are any parts triggered by that, rather than blending with them, notice them. As you do so, ask them to separate from you just a little so you can be with them without being them. And if it's possible to be curious about their triggers from that more separated state, just ask why this was so hard for them. What do they want you to know? And as you're with them and not in them, see if you can reassure them that you're still there. Remind them that you're not young and that you can help them too. You understand that this is hard work and it's scary for some of your parts, but you're there with them. As you're with these parts in this compassionate way, just remind them that you've been taking care of them and yourself for a long time. You have some wisdom about how to help everybody feel better, and you're going to act on that wisdom. When the time feels right, do whatever helps to shift focus back outside. I hope you are able to do these exercises and learn something about your protectors and what they protect. When I work with couples and they get into conflict, I'll have each of them stop, focus inside, and go through some version of these practices. I do the same when my wife and I get into it. We'll both pause, get a little time to ourselves, focus inside, find the parts that are doing the talking, listen to them, pay attention to what they're protecting, and then come back to each other and speak for those parts from a more open-hearted place. When we can actually do that, it makes a tremendous difference. We don't always succeed totally, but generally it goes much better than when I let my protectors take over and do the talking. Too many interactions are protector wars. We see it in corporations, families, and politics. Countries like the US become full of polarizations because the parts of each side take over and do the talking to each other. When one part gets extreme, it makes the protector and the other person become equally extreme or even more, and the whole dynamic just escalates over time. And that's particularly true when neither side trusts the overall leadership and has a lot of exiles. This is true at all levels of human systems. I lead trainings for meditators, conflict resolution experts, and social activists who all find this process helpful. Language like, "A part of me got very triggered by what you just said, and beneath that part of me was a part that felt hurt," conveys a much different message than, "I really don't like what you just said." It also leads to predictably different results. Being self-led and representing our parts is not just about spending time in our inner world. It's also about how we live in the outer world and relate to other people and their parts. And we're on to chapter 10. Wow. Okay, so we have 2 chapters left, and I will see you soon for the next one. Bye.